Do you know your neighbors?
I don't.
You don't. So this is, and I'm not saying you need to, but this is really a big part about what I'm talking about and what I believe is we have these unsung heroes, these neighbors, that we just don't know what they've done, and they're living amongst us. And you are one of them. You live in a community, and your community has no idea how you've served humanity and what a difference you've made in this world. And I think it's important that we understand there are a lot of people who have served humanity that live in our neighborhoods and we don't know it. And they don't get any recognition. They're not seeking recognition, and they're not getting it other than their small little circle. But yet they're out there because I think there's so many sad stories that are in the news, and we hear about all the bad things that go on, and the things that people do that are negative, and we just don't hear the good stories. And I think, Stephanie, I think you're a good story. I think
Well,
that
thank
you're the unsung hero, you're the hero next door, and your neighbors should know who you are. And yeah, yeah, they should know who you are. Hi, I'm Greg Davenport from JGD Prepared Service, and thank you for joining our vlog where we talk to the hero next door, often people in our community who serve others, often without our knowledge. Today's guest is Stephanie Enman, a physician associate with a doctorate in medical science. And Stephanie and I met while she was a student in the DMSC program, and I was teaching emergency management and global health. She is a humanitarian and a personal friend. Hi, Stephanie. How have you been?
I've been doing well, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know since the last time we talked, you've kind of taken on a new role. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I started at Taylor University. They just started a PA program, so I'm on faculty there.
We're seeing some great people come out of these PA programs, and the PA is playing a huge role in meeting the underserved needs of people within the United States and beyond. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today is the and beyond and how you played a role in that in your life. But before we get started, I'd really like to hear what led you to want to become a PA.
So I grew up in a house of medicine. Both my parents are physicians. My brother ended up going to medical school. So I thought, well, let's go away from that and go to law school. During law school, that it's truly when I accepted Christ and really felt like my calling was in medicine and to do some overseas medicine. So, of course, I got my undergrad in accounting and finance and then went to law school. So, I had to go back and get all those prerequisites. But then that gave it time for IU to start their program so I could be in their first class. PAs have a lot of autonomy. I can use those skills overseas. I loved the idea that I could switch around what specialty I was in. And I think it's nice to be able to switch that around just depending on where you are in life and what works best and different interests.
So I'm kind of curious, why not go to medical school? I mean, you had this huge influence behind you, both parents and another family member, another sibling, and so it was pretty deeply ingrained. And you decided to go the PA route. Why PA and not take the MCAT and press on?
So my mom recommended not going to medical school. I think my personality and just the things that I wanted in life with some better work-life balance. I thought for me that PA was just a better fit.
Something that pushed you this way was your acceptance of Christ in your life.
Um, I grew up going to church with my parent and some of my siblings. I ended up going to a Christian high school for a few years just because I'd seen something different in the students there that kind of intrigued me. So I got a really good head knowledge of Christianity, the Bible, but I still didn't really have that personal relationship with Christ. And that didn't come till I was in law school and kind of just searching for what to do with my life. And that's really when I talked with some friends and was kind of like, hey, I don't really know if I'm a Christian or not. And tell me what that means. And let's talk about it. And they were super excited to do that. So we were able to talk about it, accepted Christ, got baptized, went on a mission trip and then decided that it was the Lord really leading me to do overseas missions and medicine.
Right. Wow, you could have been a Christian lawyer.
Yeah, totally.
That
That's
that
just not where I felt like he was
Yeah,
leading me.
that wasn't quite the calling. Was there any other than giving your life to Christ and moving that direction going forward, were there any significant world events that seemed to be threatening you during your childhood that had a huge impact on you? I grew up during Vietnam and all the major protests associated with that time. And I've lived through the 90s with the big riots that we've had in California and other places. And we've had recent riots in the last couple of years. But when I was a child, it was Vietnam. And I remember watching TV in the draft and worrying about my brother who did end up going into the army and going to Vietnam. And so that had a huge impact on me and my future thoughts. Were there any big things going on in the world around you as a child that seem to impact you as you've gotten older and your thought process on what you want to do for humanity?
I think just getting to see, even just going on some overseas trips in high school, just getting to see other areas, other developing countries, just kind of burdened my heart for serving others. And I didn't obviously know how I would do that in high school, but as it kind of cleared up, it was going to be through medicine. And
So tell me, what inspired you to actually begin providing medical care to underserved communities in Togo? What inspired you to do that? I mean, the audience doesn't know that you've done this yet, so maybe you can give us a little bit of background about what inspired you to even look into that option, and then how you found Togo, and tell us a little bit about what it was like to go there.
yeah. So in PA school, I knew that I wanted to do some overseas opportunities if they were available. And as I said, it was IU's first year starting, so we kind of had to make our own opportunities. So there's a really great organization, CMDA. It's the Christian Medical Dental Association. They do overseas trips through GHO. I was able to go on 2 trips with them over spring breaks, and then I also did a rotation during my clinical year to the Congo for a few weeks.
So let me clarify this. During spring break in PA school, you went on a medical mission.
Hmm? Twice.
Most people are really trying to decompress during that time, and there you were packing your bags and getting on an airplane and heading out to help people. That's commendable. I mean, where did you go for those trips?
I went to Honduras and El Salvador,
Wow, that's crazy. Good for
but
you.
they were kind of the life-giving trips to help me continue through PA school.
And Honduras, I don't know what year was that. Honduras is a high threat country. Your
Yeah.
school probably wouldn't have let you go if it had been a school project because of the level, the government's rating on it. It was probably a level 3 or level 4 as far as travel goes. So that's interesting. Wow, good for you.
My clinical director was hesitant to let us go to the Congo as well for our
Yes.
rotation.
Yeah, the schools, they kind of frown on that. Anything
Ye
that's not considered extremely safe, they get a little bit nervous about. So let's go back to Togo. So you'd done a few
Oh, yeah.
trips during your spring break. You were talking to the Christian Medical and Dental Association, and then what? What was going on there?
So I got out of school and worked in the ER and kind of thought after a little over a year, I was done with the nights, just wanting something a little bit different and thought, well, if I'm going to switch, this is my time to go overseas. Now, this whole time overseas, I thought, well, it'll max be like a couple weeks trips, never anything longer. So, the church that I attend in Indianapolis helped build one of the hospitals in Togo. So, I talked to a couple of the different doctors that had been there, and there's a mission hospital in the south and in the north of Togo. So I emailed them both and I said, hey, I can come out in January and who wants me? So one of the hospitals responded and said, hey, no, we're not really looking for anyone at the time. And then the other one said, yes, absolutely, come. I signed up, was it I think 2 months.
Well, I want to keep going forward, but before we do this, you had to cover your airfare, correct? And you had to make sure that you had appropriate supplies to go there. You had to cover all of your transportation in country, and you had to provide or pay for your housing and your food. I've spent a lot of time in this world in various countries and talked to a lot of physicians that work in different countries that were raised there and they work there. And in general, their salary might be $2,000 to $3,000 a year. So even if you were getting paid, how were you covering the costs?
So that first trip, I did try to raise some support from family and friends, tax deductible donations to go there. And then I covered the rest of my expenses myself on that first trip.
Did they pay you on that first trip or was it just all volunteer?
That was all volunteer.
All volunteer. Okay. If you don't mind, can we just let's push through this? I want to hear what kept you there. What because I know you were there for like 3 years, weren't you?
Like 4.5.
4 that's longer than I thought. So that's a long time. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind, can you continue? I want to know more. Can you continue and tell me more about this? Because I'd really like to hear it.
Yeah. So I stayed for those 2 months. I came back, for about a month to the US just because I had a couple things planned, and then went again for another 2 months, and at that time, I didn't live on the compound in that guest house or accommodations. I moved into town with a roommate that I hadn't met before. There were supposed to be 2 roommates, but one of them had some family health issues that she had to return to the US for. So I got to stay in a new place um, with a person that I'd never met before, which actually turned out great because now she's a best friend of mine. At that time, like I said, was living in the town, getting to know kind of more of town life, and was really enjoying it and thought, I think I can do this for a little bit longer. And I thought, a year probably sounds good. Then I thought, well, if I'm going to stay a year, I probably should learn French, which is the kind of educated language there. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to go to language school, I might as well come back for 2 years. So after I left in about June, I came back to the US for a couple months to fundraise to be able to go to language school in Switzerland for a few months and then go back and serve again.
That must have been a tough time in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Darn it. Oh my
Darn
goodness.
it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. How were you communicating before that? A translator every time you saw somebody?
Yeah, so there's always a translator in your room, and at any given point, there's at least 10 different languages being spoken.
Mhm.
So I always had a translator, and then sometimes we had to go my English to then he spoke French to somebody else to be able to get back to the correct language.
I don't know if you know who Art Linkletter is, but he had a show on TV when I was a kid. I'm getting older, so this is a long time ago. But they did this one exercise, and it's been done many times since then, where they had all these little kids in a circle, and one kid whispered into the other kid's ear, and they wanted to see how the original statement that he made to the first child ended up as it whispered around the circle and got to the end. And it never was the same thing by the time it got to the end, of course. But I found in countries that I've gone to that when I'm using translators, especially if I'm using 2 or 3 times to get from one side to the other, that I might be listening to the patient talk for 3 minutes and then the answer comes back to me, she said no. And you're kind of wondering, well, gee whiz, what happened in between, this whole conversation to where it got to me? And maybe that was all I needed to know. But nevertheless, I always felt a little bit left out in that process.
Yeah,
Did you ever feel left out like that? Or
I did. And sometimes I'd be like, no, no, she said a lot more. What
yeah,
did she say? And
right.
sometimes it was like, oh, she started talking about this, and it didn't have anything to do with it. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that always found that interesting. When I was in India, they do a lot of communication with head movements.
Mm.
So a lot of times the translator would do a certain type of bob, and I had to tell him, I said, I really don't, I can't interpret this, what you're doing. So,
Right.
I need verbal but I was trying to learn, his body language at the same time so that it wasn't just all on him. But nevertheless, it is different. We have to learn to communicate. And sometimes we got to learn to communicate with our hands, our facial expressions, our touch, and it can't just always be the word itself because there's so much more we can gather. And I'll bet you were doing that when you were talking to these people. Yeah.
So my physical exam was very important, and then obviously that history is super important as well, but it did start to rely a lot on physical exam because I wasn't always sure I was getting everything.
Yeah. And you learn the big words like pain,
Yeah.
or,
Right.
or things like that.
Yeah.
And then how to interpret different things like sticky BM was meant constipation, in some countries I go to, but I wouldn't know that. You have to learn to interpret the different sayings that
Yeah.
they have for things, and that's
And then
interesting.
certain different tribes had different ways to say something, or
Yes.
some would be very stoic and not say anything and then have a big issue.
So you decided, okay, I'm going to do this language, and I'm going to go there for another couple years, but yet you ended up, it sounds like another 3.5 years or so, if not longer. And why so long? Why so long?
Um, I just felt like that is where the Lord had me at the time, and I I feel like I wasn't just surviving, but for the most part of the time, it had its times, but was kind of thriving there. And I kind of felt like I'm doing well here. I'm supported here financially, prayerfully, and so not everyone can do this, and I can do it, and I think I'm doing well. So I'm going to keep serving until it doesn't seem to be doing well anymore, or I don't seem to be doing well.
So the cost of living for you must have been really low because we've talked about, and I don't think we need to say the value here, but we've talked about what you were paid while you were there. And so I know what you were paid, and that's not a survivable wage in the United States for sure. But either the cost of living was really low or you had significant outside financial help during this time.
Yeah. So I was really just paid by a stipend by the mission agency for the hospital. We actually have to raise funds kind of to be able to work there. But then people are very generous. Not everybody's called to go somewhere, but they are sometimes called to give to for others to go.
And
So
that's service
I
too. I
yes,
firmly
definitely.
believe that service comes in many different forms, and you don't have to put yourself at risk or hardship
Yeah,
if that's not something you can do. And sometimes money is the way you serve to help
well,
humanity.
totally.
So good
And
for
I couldn't
you.
have done any of it without their financial support.
Right, right. How did it work with being a PA there? I mean, some countries I go into, it doesn't really matter. It's good. It's all good. And some places are kind of weird about it. They don't understand the profession, and they're not too keen on having somebody who doesn't have an MD or a DO behind their name. So how did that work there for you?
So, for the most part, we're in the North. The government doesn't always not care, but doesn't always go up there as much. But as we had government officials come, they were okay with PAs. There's some, I don't know if there are any PA schools in Togo right now, but they had some in surrounding areas. So the government was familiar with PAs. And if I was on call at the hospital, there was always somebody that I could ask a question to.
So that sounds like you were ethically bound, and that's pretty
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
And I think that, helped with the government being able to accept us as well.
When you say us, were there other PAs there?
Um, there was an NP there. There was a PA originally there who kind of started the hospital, but he unfortunately passed away from a tropical disease there. But
Did you find that threatening?
that he passed away there.
From a tropical disease, something that you might not have had been threatened with in the United States. I mean, when we do these trips, it's very rare that you're not going into an area that presents some type of threat that is not a threat
Yeah.
at home here where
Yeah.
we're used to. So when that
Yeah.
happened, were you there when that happened?
I wasn't. I
You
came
weren't?
about a year after that, but it was actually his passing that then I heard about here, and it was like, "Oh, well, he was a PA and he was doing overseas stuff. Maybe I can go and where he was and see about working there." Um, so no, but to get back to your original question, it made me just cautious like I am here of being aware of different diseases, but again, I really felt like that's where the Lord called me. If that is how I'm going to lose my life, then I hope it doesn't happen that way. But if that is, it is. I got malaria about 4-ish times. That was not super fun,
Yeah. Yeah, so
but
you weren't taking which for if you're there for 4 years, I mean, gee whiz, you're not gonna take, malaria prophylaxis for 4 years, and so you all
I
you
didn't. I still got it.
you you did, and you still got oh my god well, there's resistancies and stuff,
Yeah.
I've never had malaria, but I've always used bug juice. I've seen a lot of patients with malaria when I've been in different countries, but I was able to avoid it, but you're probably in a high risk area. You're there for a long, long, long time. It'd be kind of odd
Yeah,
for you to not
definitely.
feel that threat. Were you using netting over your bed and trying to stay indoors at dawn and dusk and using bug spray in addition to the prophylactic medications you were using or
I would use bug spray. I would try not to be out in the bugs as best I could. I did not use netting over my bed. I had a fan that I used to try to help, mostly with the heat because it was real hot there. But yeah, it didn't seem to, I didn't get it enough to decide that I needed the net.
so why 4 years? However long it was when you finally made it to this long trip that you were there. Why did you stay so long?
I think it was just relationships that I was developing with the Togolese there, the other missionaries. I really felt like I was helping, that I had a calling there, that I was doing something. Not that you can't be replaced by other people, but there's not a ton of people going. So it really would have been hard to totally be replaced. I mean, everyone's replaceable.
Sure. Well,
It was just really a calling, and I really enjoyed the serving.
right.
I've gone back twice since coming back here just to be able to visit and go back and serve still.
You feel alive when you're doing it? Just feel so energized and yeah. I mean, that's a sensation or a feeling I have. I feel like I thrive in an environment that, where you really are serving humanity beyond what you could possibly imagine. I mean, it's just hard to imagine, and it makes you feel good. But most and I'm not gonna try to insult anybody. I'm not wanting to insult anybody, and that's not my goal here. But a lot of people will go for the baby picture. So they'll do one mission trip in their lifetime, and they have a picture of them holding a child, and they'll show that for 10 years. And, I still commend them for going, although I do believe service needs to be an ongoing process to really do good in communities, not just one trip. But you filled a role way beyond the baby holding picture and really made a difference, I'm sure, in the people of that country. And I think that's really commendable. If you were to say this was probably the most memorable thing I have where I felt like I really made a difference, and really the long-term component of this is probably one of the biggest players in this, but that's not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for one instant. Is there one instant where you felt that it's the most memorable thing of the whole time I was there?
I'm gonna give you 2.
Okay.
So during malaria season, it's really rough with the kids being brought in. They usually have a hematocrit of between 8 to 20. A lot will come in seizing with cerebral malaria. So there was a sweet, probably 2 or 3-year-old girl that came in, just kept seizing, ended up being cerebral malaria. We gave her multiple different kinds of medicine. dosing it continually, and she just kept seizing for, I mean, off and on, but for at least 2 days, and I was off, but still wanted to check on her, see how she was doing, and she was still seizing, and then I came back maybe 2 days later, and this little girl came running from the back, and she had recovered, and her grandmother was just so excited and just so happy and thankful, and it was just so amazing to see how she made it through the disease, but then also seemingly made it through unscathed. It's those things that help you get through when the kids come in with those hematocrits of 8 and you can't get the blood in fast enough and they pass away. So the good stories are really the good stories.
Good stories are interlaced with sadness. So they're the highlights. They make you feel like you've made a difference in a pool of problems. I mean, they're underserved. A lot of times you don't have the medication, you don't have the blood products, you just don't have the equipment or the ability to do things.
I can share the other story. One of the physicians that I worked with, he made connections with a couple people in the States, and we would be able to send some heart patients over to the States to get surgery and then come back because they just didn't have the ability to do that surgery in Togo or surrounding areas. So I got to, I think it was February of 2020. I was coming back from Iceland and I picked up one of the kids in New York to fly back with him. And I'd seen a little bit about COVID, but didn't really have that much on it. So I was traveling back, and it was apparently during that time, then everything else shut down right after we got in. But I got to travel back with I believe he was 4, Ganyu, a kid that had just had heart surgery that I was bringing back to his parents. And I spoke French. He didn't speak French. He only spoke his tribal language. And so we got to travel on a 10-hour flight together and then another 8-hour trip in the car after we got to Togo up to the hospital in the north. So it was a really special experience to be able to help facilitate his coming and getting his life-saving heart surgery here and then being able to take him back to his parents.
And that's where the nonverbal communication became pretty important. The
Yeah,
small touch, just the small touch to the
yeah,
forearm and the
yeah.
smile and, yeah, those sound like a very phenomenal experiences, and it's hard to do a trip and not have those occur. There is sadness that usually happens, on our trips, your trips, but when you have those highlights, they help you to walk away and feeling good about you've accomplished something and served, humanity that was there. So that's good. What would you say? Did you have more to say there on that first?
Yep.
Or what would you say were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in delivering healthcare there?
I think initially the biggest one was I didn't know enough about malaria or dosing or how it's done there. So a lot of the kind of kids that I initially saw, I was like asking questions all the time. Um, so finally, one of the long-term missionaries said, "Give me the kids. You can see the adults who are coming in with more kind of diabetes, GERD, heart failure, kind of easier things that I've dealt with more um, than the kids with a lot more of the tropical diseases that I wasn't as used to."
There's a learning curve there, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge learning curve, and that I can see where that would be difficult because that's not something that's hit on very heavily in school. I mean,
Yeah.
it's touched on, but there's just not in your rotations, you're not getting exposure to travel medicine or tropical medicine, whatever we wanna call it. You're just not getting exposure to that during your clinical years, so it's more of an academic thing, so the recall isn't being pushed forward. But I'll bet by the time you left, you had that down pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
You're a foreigner there. So how did you build trust and rapport with the community? What were you able to do? Was it just because you were providing medical care that it created that trust and support from the community members, or was there something beyond that that you needed to do to have that happen?
I think a lot of it was providing medical care. The hospital had at that point already been known for providing good medical care. So I think that helped patients coming in. And then I think it was developing relationships with the translators, the nurses, the techs there. And I think it's just providing good medical care, showing that you genuinely care about the patients and just showing a lot of humility because it's not my country. I don't know all the cultural things. I can try to learn some of them, but even that you're never going to truly know all of it or be able to do all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, sometimes the ethics and the cultural issues of the places that you go in the world are more difficult than the medical care as far as, doing things that don't insult or create problems, and sometimes we bring our beliefs with us, and we try to promote them and put them upon people without understanding their culture. And we make a huge mistake when we do that, I think. I had a student once. I was in a country, I believe it was either Haiti or Nicaragua, I can't remember exactly. And the village was giving us some food, which was probably some of the best food that they could eat in a year. And they were serving it to us, out of respect and kindness for the fact that we had come and were helping them, and one of the students started giving her food to this dog. That was so insulting to the villagers that she would do that, and it was a lesson learned for the student, and a discussion that we had. But I remember that created quite a bit of conflict at that moment. When you walked away from there, how did you reconcile in your mind your impact from the work that you did on that community? What would you say was your impact? Was it just that you gave medical care that otherwise wasn't given, or did you have a role in creating influence on that community, which we just kind of talked about maybe not doing? Was there more that you did there besides just the medicine?
Yeah, so the nice thing about being there was a large team of missionaries that did some church planting, that did a radio ministry as well. It's not really necessarily your influence particularly, but helping promote the whole organization there, those different aspects. So when I think about leaving and kind of what I left was more kind of friendships and hopefully having an influence on those people. And I still am able to keep up with some of them and still hope to visit again.
Yeah, I think sometimes that gets lost too. And medicine's important, but I know when I am on disaster trips, we will help people rebuild their homes while we're in their village. So there's times where you're not seeing patients, and you could go sit around the campfire or whatever it might be, or you could look out in that community and see how could you create some goodwill and show your kindness and compassion in other ways besides medicine itself. There have been trips, however, where I'm seeing 150 patients in a day, and it's bedtime when you're done. So
Yeah,
it's not
totally.
always going to work, but if it does work, it's
Yeah.
nice to provide that goodwill. So I think that's an important thing too. So what
Yeah, I
what are
definitely think that working at the hospital, I mean, I think that counts as ministering to people as well, even though
yes,
a lot of people would think, well, you're just doing your job. Well, I am, but it's also
it's a
there's more
huge
to it.
it's a huge segue.
Yeah.
And there's some places, I've been in some countries where it's really frowned upon to talk about your Christian faith, and it could put your life at high risk. But I've been to a lot of places where it's not putting your life at risk, and it's a free process where you can talk about it and have an impact on somebody. So yeah, yeah, tough topic, tough topic. So what advice? You've done a lot. You've done a lot. You've served humanity. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when I first found out about your past, it's quite a few years ago now, not that many, but it's been a few years. When I first found out about your past, I said, you are a true hero. You are somebody who has actually done it and has served and made a difference in people's lives. And it's a lot of people, do the academic process or do one trip, but you got it in the swimming pool, and you were in the swimming pool for a long time. If you can understand the analogy there, but you just didn't stick your toe in. Very impressive. So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to get involved at this level like you did?
I think that it would start with going to a place for a short time to see if it's somewhere you think you could be longer. So going for a month or a couple weeks and not just staying around like the hospital or in my case, like on the compound, but really going into town, seeing if you could do the things that it would take to stay there longer. Just again, learning more about the culture there, what you're going to be kind of integrated into to see if that's something that you think you could do. Temperatures got to around 120 sometimes,
That's
and
hot.
that I was okay with it. My house never had AC.
And
Other people, that was something they struggled with all the time.
what was the humidity? I mean, was the humidity really high?
It depends on the season. When it was around 120, it wasn't super humid.
So a real dry heat, but that's still pretty hot. Doesn't matter. That's hot. But yeah, yeah.
Real hot when your electricity goes out at night.
Yeah, which probably happened quite a bit, I'll bet. Yeah. The I think that's good advice. And going back to the swimming pool, the way I see
Mhm.
that is you put your toe and check the water before you dive in. And I've seen a lot of people that have discovered that the reality is a big distance from the fantasy that they've had. And I've been on
For
trips
sure.
in very hard conditions where they're there for one day and they either disappear or they're crying and begging to go back home. And they discover that this just wasn't their thing.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
I think before somebody makes a long-term commitment, it's a good idea. So very good advice, a good idea to see if it's really something you want to and can. You may want to do it, but make sure it's something you
right.
can do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. I like
Because the worst thing you can do is go and not be able to handle it and then be a burden, I
right,
hate to say, on the people that are there
right.
trying to serve as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because for as a team, if somebody disappears because they're fearful, then you're down a team member. Or if somebody's constantly crying and begging to be
Yeah,
evacuated out, and there's no option to get evacuated out, that can really cause conflict in the team too. So it's a good idea to start small. I think don't go for high threat. If you're doing disaster, don't go for high threat. Start small, see if this is something you're comfortable with, and then, maybe advance little by little and educate yourself by talking to people who have done it before, such as yourself, and getting an idea of what it might be like. So I think that's really good advice. So you're in education now, and
mhm.
I believe in mentorship. I hope that somehow you convince the school, university where you work to on humanitarian work for your students. Every program I've ever built, I've built in the concept of working some component of volunteerism and humanitarian ventures. Have you been able to do that?
So we have servant leadership as one of our kind of pillars of our program. So service is a requirement, and now people can do that anywhere, doing different kinds of service, but we also I'm leading a trip in January to Ecuador to kind of trial that area out, see if it's gonna be somewhere where we can continue to do some medical work there. So it's definitely our goal to get some of that humanitarian overseas travel and
Right.
work in.
Give them
I'd
exposure.
love to take Yeah, I'd love to, if it worked out sometime, to do an elective clinical rotation in Togo with the students as well.
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be fun? Because you know it inside and out, so you'd be able to really
Yeah,
get them an understanding of the whole community and what can be done, what can't be done, and so on. That would be pretty sweet. Yeah, maybe. I guess it's gonna depend on what it's rated as far as its threat level. If it's a level 2 or less, which is pretty safe, the school will let you go. Level 3, you're gonna have to argue with the school. Level 4, hang it up. They're not gonna let you go. I mean, good luck with that one.
yeah, right, and the fluctuations, you never know.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So tell me about your living conditions right now.
Is quite a contrast. I'm in a house in a neighborhood. I don't worry about getting electrocuted every time I plug something in.
Right.
I got lots of shocks, but I got a full-on electrocution one time in Togo. Yeah, that was an experience.
Makes your hair stand up a little bit.
I Don't worry about the water. Yeah, electricity rarely goes out.
Do you have an air
So
conditioner?
I do have an air conditioner. I'm frequently cold at night, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
quite a
Do
contrast.
you know your neighbors?
I don't.
You don't. So this is and I'm not saying you need to, but this is really a big part about what I'm talking about and what I believe is we have these unsung heroes, these neighbors, that we just don't know what they've done, and they're living amongst us. And you are one of them. You live in a community, and your community has no idea how you've served humanity and what a difference you've made in this world. And I think it's important that we understand there are a lot of people who have served humanity that live in our neighborhoods and we don't know it. And they don't get any recognition. They're not seeking recognition, and they're not getting it other than their small little circle. But yet they're out there because I think there's so many sad stories that are in the news, and we hear about all the bad things that go on, and the things that people do that are negative, and we just don't hear the good stories. And I think, Stephanie, I think you're a good story. I think
Oh,
that
thank you.
you're the unsung hero, you're the hero next door, and your neighbors should know who you are. And, yeah, yeah, they should know who you are. But, I'm not saying you have to go out there and toot your horn, but people should know that you.
So I haven't been there a year yet.
Yeah.
A recent move.
I was talking to a friend of mine doing the same thing, as we're doing right now, and
Mhm.
he'd lived in his home for 20 plus years, and his neighbors had somewhat of an idea of his background. And they had a day in the town where they were celebrating the medical community. And everybody in their neighborhoods was supposed to go out and pound on pots and pans to let the medical people know. So one of them called him up and said, "Hey, you need to go out on your back porch right now." And then the whole neighborhood lit up with them banging on their pots and pans to say thank you.
Oh,
So
that's so sweet.
it is, it is. But, if your neighbors knew anything about you, they'd be banging their pots and pans too, I'm sure. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. If you have anything else that you'd like to say, words of advice that you would like to give, people considering a, life of service?
I would just say if you have any inkling to want to do it, take that step and do it. It's very rewarding. It will be the best times. You might have some worse times, but it will definitely just be some of the best times that you could have, being able to serve and just live out a calling.
Well, I applaud you. I applaud you. I applaud you the first time I met you, and I learned about your history, and I applaud you today. So thank you, Stephanie, for taking the time to talk to us. And hopefully, this talk will have an impact on others out there who have a desire to serve through medicine. You take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you. You too.